Thank you very much, Amy. It's a tremendous honor to be here. I first came to BJ several, I don't know, 10 years ago maybe. People had been telling me about it for a long time, and I grew up in Lansing, Michigan in a, I was in the synagogue that broke off from the other synagogue, of course. You know, it's like that, that old joke about the, Jew on a desert island. If there's one Jew, there'll be two synagogues, so there's one he refuses to go to. And so I was in the synagogue that broke away, and it had it was a very small synagogue, and it was very sort of homemade. We didn't have a rabbi or a cantor attached. Everything was done by the members of the congregation, but very similar to BJ in that it was a kind of it was the conservative service that we did, and it was a very socially progressive synagogue, and women had a completely equal place in that synagogue. However, my father, who grew up in Germany and left when he was 15, he was the son of a chazan, and his father was the head of the Jewish community in the town that he grew up in. And the whole time I was growing up, what I would hear during services was, "That's not the way you do it." And he had a very strong sense of, he had actually a very strong knowledge and aesthetic sense of how a service is constructed and how the holidays differ from each other and what the cycle of the Jewish year is. And when I first came to BJ, I thought, oh, that's what my father hears in his head. And so the reason I joined BJ was so that my father could come here for the high holidays. And he has done so for many years, and it's tremendously meaningful to him and meaningful to me. So it's a great honor for me to be asked to participate in this way. I also am very glad that there were appetizers, because it's a little terrorizing to see I speak and then dinner. So I really don't like to be in between those two things, so I'm glad that you have had some food. It's been a funny sort of a June for me, funny sort of a gay pride month for me. This is actually the second of two events in support of marriage equality that I was asked to participate in this month. The second one, my friend, the Reverend John DeNiro, is next weekend, right, next Sunday, having an unwedding ceremony at the church where he is presiding this month, or through the summer, right, St. Mark's in the Bowery, forever and ever, where he now is the king of that church. And he's asked me to participate in that as well. And in both cases, my immediate response was, me? Was there a list of lesbians and we got to the K's? Like, why? I'm neither an activist nor am I an obvious choice to speak particularly on the subject of marriage equality. Because while I of course believe that if straight people can get married, so should gay and lesbian people have that right. But I'm honest, I'm hardly the obvious spokesperson for this, as my ex-girlfriend, with whom I was partners for 18.5 years, would be happy to attest. And in fact, she told me that if I wanted her to, she would write a note explaining why I was not suited for the task. But I have, in fact, thought a lot about this issue, and it will not come as a surprise to anyone who knows me that I have a lot of opinions about it, and a lot of thoughts. And a Seder really seems like a perfect format for me to share those thoughts and my questions on this topic, things that have been rattling around in my brain for some time. And so in the traditional time-honored Jewish style, I will throw out some of these things as a starting point for further discussion. I'll share a few anecdotes, I'll ask some questions, I'll offer what might be some controversial interpretations or ideas, I'll waver a bit in some eddies of intentional ambiguity. For those of you who have not spent a lot of time with Jews or been to Seders before, this is essentially what a Seder is. So first of all, I would like to say marriage equality, of course, and without any equivocation, I believe that LGBT people should have the same ability, the same rights to form families that straight people do. I believe that these families should receive absolutely equal recognition and status. I think of my friend Annie Jobst, who was one half of the legendary downtown performance duo Dance Noise, and I particularly loved Annie because her mind worked in this particular strange way that I thought of as art logic. She had this very kind of compelling and bizarre artist brain, and she was on a panel many years ago that was, I think, on women in the arts, and someone said to her, "Do you consider yourself a feminist?" And her response, which I will never forget, was, "Of course I'm a feminist. What do I look like, a dildo?" So yes, absolutely. I am not a dildo. I believe in marriage equality. I absolutely believe that we should ferret out all the subtle and obvious ways that we are asked to settle for second-class citizenship. I did spend 18 and a half years in my partnership, and along with many of you, I'm sure, I had that particular rage, helplessness, combo platter feeling that accompanies having to check single on a tax form, or being told you can't get the same discount on your car insurance that's available to some 20-year-old who's been married for 2 days to a guy she met in a bar 3 weeks ago. And you think, really? Really? I'm in my 40s. I've been with this person for almost 2 decades. I know things about commitment and relationship that you, 30-year-old car insurance salesperson, cannot even imagine. Really? We don't qualify for the marriage discount? It's a helpless feeling, really. It's an enraging invisibility. And it's not about the money, although I do like a discount. It is about the invisibility. It is about the obvious, galling injustice of having your love, your life, your commitments, your sacrifices, your family rendered non-existent in the most arbitrary and senseless ways on a daily basis. It's about straight people taking for granted their own status and not understanding why these tiny slights are just as corrosive as the big ones we all talk about. And yes, I have also been on one side of an emergency room door with my partner on the other side, responding to the question, are you related to Margaret Healy? And I have responded to that question by wedging my upper body through the sliding check-in window and yelling, Margaret Healy is my partner. She's my spouse. You will open that door now. Which they did, by the way. A sharp blast of full-on femme toppiness has its uses. I am also deeply interested in the ways that second-class status still works within us. I feel sometimes that there are these psychic nooks and crannies within us where bits of leftover internalized homophobia lurk until something happens to shine a light on them. And I find myself thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that was in there. I thought I'd cleared all that out years ago. And I'll tell you a story about a very striking example of this for me. Years ago, I was doing my show 2.5 Minute Ride at the La Jolla Playhouse. And one of the members of the board was a man named Ed Richard. He was an older gentleman. He was a very successful businessman. He'd been married to a woman for many, many years. And I often think that these moments of sort of righteous indignation come from people who've lived in the straight world for a long time. They have that built-in sense of entitlement that sometimes those of us who have been queer our whole lives can't quite get to, or can't quite get to so easily. So Ed had been married to this woman for many years. He'd had a couple of children. I think they were already adults. When he realized he was gay, he fell in love with a man named Warren. He ended his marriage, I think, fairly amicably, and he started life with Warren. And they lived outside San Diego in some super fancy architect house with, you know, a lot of amazing art in some fancy gated community in, like, Rancho Extremo Wealtho or something. He was very wealthy, very Orange County. Anyway, we were having dinner one night, and Ed was telling me that he was thinking that they were going to have to move, that he and Ed could not stay in this community. And he told me about being at a charity event. He and Warren went to this charity event, that it was the home of a society lady down the road. And at the event, the woman had hugged him and said, I just love you and Warren. You're so cute. And Ed said to her, we are not cute. We are grown men in an adult relationship. We are not your pets. And I was so struck by this because I realized how often I had accepted being patronized in this way, how often I had not questioned that people sometimes funnel their discomfort with my queerness, with my partnership, into what seems positive but is actually a very subtle form of minimization.